All right, we're on.
Well,
How's it
well, I am exhausted, but it's not about me right now. It's about you.
Yes. Okay.
Oh, I'm tired. Not even funny. All right,
Let's
cool.
let's do it.
All right, briefly tell me a little bit about yourself right now. Your work, kids, are you married? A little bit about your church, any ministry
Sure.
involved, and all that good stuff.
Okay, so my name is Sandry Esquivel, first of all. I am currently a marriage and family therapist. I work pretty much treating multiple different types of people. One of my jobs is treating men and women convicted of sexual offenses. I also am a clinical supervisor of substance use counselors working at the jails, the men and women's jails in LA County. I also have a private practice with my husband. It's called Radical Counseling and Consultation, where we treat families and just individuals or couples for all kinds of counseling issues and mental health issues. I don't have any children. I've been married now. I'm going on 2 years, and I've been with my partner for about 4.5 years. We met at work. He's also a therapist. He's a lot older than me. He's about like 23 years older than me. And we are from different cultural backgrounds. He's Jewish and American. And I come from a predominant, Mexican family. You know, I'm Mexican. I was born in Mexico. I was born in Mexicali, Baja California. But my family is from Guanajuato, south in there in Mexico. I grew up pretty traditional in my upbringing. Huge family. I'm the oldest of 7 children. My youngest sibling is 6 years old. And I have a brother who has a disability. He has Cri-du-Chek syndrome, and he's 21 years old. It's a very rare syndrome it's a deletion of the 5th chromosome. So it affects people differently, but in a nutshell, it's called the cry of the cat. So he's not able to speak. And when he cries, it sounds like a cat is crying, and he doesn't walk. And so he's, not able to walk. He scoots around to get around the house, and he uses ASL and different types of signs to tell us when he's hungry or he wants something to drink, or, he's handsome. So so he's amazing. He's incredible. But that's my little brother, John. And I also have 2 other brothers. One of my brother, we're like 1 year apart. So I'm 33. My brother's 32. My other brother's 31. My sister's like 27. My other sister's about 26 or so. So we're like literally 1 year apart. And then there's a 14-year-old gap. And then it's my brother, John. And then after my brother, John, then there's like another huge gap. And there's my little sister, Sadie. My parents are fairly young. They're like 51 years old young this year. They got married very young when they were about 16 years old in Mexico. And so they had me when they were 17. And that's kind of in a nutshell my life story. I just told you, right? I grew up in La Puente. I've lived in La Puente my whole life. I grew up around a lot of gangs. I've seen a lot of horrible stuff happen to people who live around me and that I've known and in my family. Like I said, a lot of gangs, around a lot of drugs. I thank God I never got into drugs. And I did like run with like gangs for a little while, but I was fortunate enough to like not really get into deep of anything. I went to a lot of different schools because I just was not a very good student growing up. Not because like the work was hard, but because I grew up in a very neglected home, being like the oldest of 7, and in a very abusive home. So there was a lot of violence all the time. My mom was very aggressive. Again, she was a very young mom. And so there was a lot of infidelity on my dad's part. And my dad was very young when he married her. And it's not a justification, but it provides a rationale for why things were so hectic growing up for me. I was the oldest. So like the way that it went is where they follow that hierarchy, right? That the oldest is pretty much in charge of everything, but also in trouble for everything. So everything my brothers or sisters got into was my fault. So there was a lot of beatings that happened, and just very hard. I think I come from, a family with a lot of psychopathy in their backgrounds. My two great grandparents were both like revolutionaries and just like men that just, I don't know, they just harmed and killed a lot of people in their youth, and the women that they were with were just, very traditional women who just kind of raised kids, and that was pretty much their life. And so growing up, I would hear all the time, like, oh, well, you're very pretty. You should just find a husband with money and like, it's a wrap, And it used to make me so angry, Edgar, because I'd be like, what? Like, like, I don't want to get married for this, to have someone cheat on me, to have someone, to struggle with money and food for kids. Like, I didn't want to get married. Like, I was just very, very against, marriage in general, because the relationships and marriages that I had seen growing up were very not healthy. Right. And so, I again grew up with a lot of beatings. There was a lot of different abuse that happened growing up that, to make it short, I didn't realize happened until I got older and I understood what abuse was. But something that I really do remember, and I'm thankful to my mother about, is that she taught me the fear of God really, really early. And that means like really, really young, I knew there was a God. And I believed there was a God, and I would pray to God. And so there was, again, a lot of scary moments that happened in my life. Just my parents, fighting. My dad was never like a batterer, like an abuser. He never, ever hurt my mom, or I never saw him curse at her or anything like that. He's very honorable in a lot of ways, my father. And I really love him because he never really showed us any of that negative stuff. If I knew my dad was not a good husband, it was because my mom told me, not because I saw him do anything bad. But I say all of that to say, because I have one of my very first memories with God that I remember was I used to share this room with all my siblings, Edgar, and I used to have the top bunk bed, and I used to sleep with my two little sisters who were about 5 and 6 years younger than me. And I remember that in one occasion, my parents were fighting in the other room, and we lived in this converted garage. You know how we do it. And so they were fighting in the garage, and I could hear my mom screaming, and like it was very loud and it sounded very scary. And I remember that I would grab my sisters and I would hold their ears and I would tell them, like, just don't listen, don't listen. It's fine, don't be scared, And I remember looking up in the top bunk while I'm covering their ears, and I see the cross. And to my understanding, the only thing that I remember was that, I thought the man on the cross is God. I didn't know Jesus. I didn't know about his son. My thing was all just, God is the man on the cross. You know what I mean? So I didn't know why. I was little. I must have been about 9 or 10 years old. But I remember looking back, and I was praying with my little sisters, and I was saying, God, like, make them stop. Like, make them stop fighting, because like my sisters don't need to hear this. Like, they're scared. And I wasn't big enough to protect them from hearing all of that. But I tried. God knows I tried many, many times with my brothers and sisters, and just, there was a lot of us. And that was one of my very earliest memories that I remember, just calling out to the Lord to intervene. among many, many times. So I've always been a believer. I've always believed there was a God, and I always felt God was with me my whole life. But I didn't understand the concept of the triune God or Jesus or any of that stuff until way later. But what was really funny was, because I was such a neglected child, and it wasn't because like my parents were just like wanting to be neglectful in my understanding, but rather that my dad worked 2 full-time jobs my entire life growing up. He is like such a hard worker. And my mom worked a lot too. So when my mom came home from her full-time job, it was like she was coming home to take care of business. Did you guys clean the house? Do you guys have food to eat? Like, she wasn't trying to check in with you and see what's going on, mija, right? Like, she's just like, did you eat already? Like, get out of my face. Like, I've had a long day, And so it's really sad to say, but I don't have any memories of my mom being happy or being nice growing up, like, at all. I have a lot of my dad, because my dad was very goofy. He's still really goofy, and he's just he was funny and he's charming. So like, I have a lot of memories of my father like being funny, and my mom being mad because my dad's being funny and playing with us. But so it's kind of sad to see that. But I remember that growing up, I didn't want to be like that. I didn't want to grow up and become a woman, because I saw all the women around me just live like such like terrible lives, not happy in their marriages, being, being cheated on all the time, never having enough money, always just having to deal with the kids and having to clean. And I was just like, dude, it sucks to be a woman. Like, I do not want to, And so, I just grew up, and I tried to hold on to my tomboyishness as long as I could. I was not into boys. I was not into liking anybody. I was like 13 years old, and people at school would make fun of me a lot. And one of the things that I remember being called really early on was a lesbian, because I refused to make out with the boys at school. And so I was like, I don't know what that is, but whatever it is, I'm not that, because I had no idea what they were talking about. And so I got bullied a lot, and I didn't have an older sister or brother. Like, I was the oldest. So in the beginning, like, it would suck to go home and be bullied at home pretty much by my mom, and then go to school and be bullied at school too, So I kind of started developing this like this persona, that, what, they could beat me at home and treat me however they want at home, because I can't do anything about it. But at school, nobody's going to bully me.
Right.
So I became really hard, and I became very avoidant, and I wasn't very like like the popular friendly girl. I just was not. I was known for throwing guys in the trash can, for beating up guys, for hitting people with the tether ball and a basketball right in the face because they got on my nerves, Like, I was just known for all the wrong like reasons. And then fast forward middle school, I would get bullied a lot for just being, I want to say honestly, just for being pretty. Like, I got bullied hardcore just for not looking like everyone else. Just for, I remember some of the harshest words people would call me pretty much was every word but harlot, right? Is what they would call, and I had no idea what that was. I never had a boyfriend. I hadn't had sex yet. I had no idea. But they would always call me all these horrible names. And I would be like, why do they hate me so much? Like, I've done nothing. So I always felt a lot safer with men, with boys, because boys, like, sure, they were idiots, but they were funny, and they weren't like trying to be mean to you. We were just hang out, and I wasn't very girly then. Like, I would wear, very baggy pants and loose t-shirts and I was into skating and I wanted, to ride, rollerblades and go on the bike and scooters. I wasn't into any of the girl stuff, and yeah, and I just kept getting abused or whatever. But when I turned about 13 years old, I remember I was doing this favor for one of my cousins at the school. Somebody was picking on her, and I went over there to like handle biz, supposedly. And on my way walking back from school, I met this guy, and it was funny, but I guess I knew him in the past, and he was talking to me, and we were just talking, and he was in school and I was not in school. And later on I found out he was like a big brother to my cousin's like little boyfriend. They were like 11 or something. And he said, "Hey, would you like to be my girlfriend?" And I'm like, I kid you not, I'm like, well, what does that mean? How often do I have to see you? Because like I wasn't about that life, and he became my boyfriend, but we would just talk on the phone. So for like 3 years I had my first relationship over just the phone. And in my teenage mind, this was the only person in the world that cared about me, Edgar. So my parents could care less about what happened. They were too busy with their lives and trying to deal with their crazy marriage. And I was just kind of like, I wasn't too little to play around with things anymore. I grew up really fast. And so I spent a lot of my time just on the phone with this person, And then I want to say I kind of just forgot about God for a while. I really did, because I was just in the midst of growing up and not really doing good things, I wasn't like out there doing drugs, but I was out there tagging streets. I was out there hanging out with people who were doing drugs, who were selling drugs, who were shooting up people, who were shooting up houses, and I didn't understand it all, but society and the world kept telling me, this is where you belong. You don't deserve anything better. Like, this is what people like you do. And it just didn't make sense to me, because I would be like, really, is this really all my life, is going to be? Because school didn't seem to work out for me. Nobody really liked me at school, and the teachers didn't like me at school either. And I got bullied by a lot of teachers as well. I remember in 8th grade, I had a teacher tell me, like, one day you're going to work at McDonald's, and I want you to remember what I like, and you're not going to amount to anything, and all this other stuff. And I hated math ever since, It's a terrible teacher, by the way, but I remember things like that. And it makes sense to me why I was so resentful, so bitter. And I feel like that's where that, like, honestly, that spirit of bitterness attached itself to me. Because from then on, it was like, and I think if I look back, it was probably like one of the first times that I was ever depressed. I just didn't know it. And I was so angry, and nobody could tell me anything. And so I was like fighting girls left and right. I would walk out of school, middle school. I remember this one time walking out of school, and there was like 10 girls waiting for me at the corner, of a park. And I had this like little friend who had this like little bike, and he was like, "I'll just take you on my pegs and I'll take you home, we'll go the other way." And I was just like, nah, it's all right. Cause I wasn't scared of people hitting me, because I grew up being beat my whole life. So I was like, it ain't like they're going to kill me. So it doesn't matter, let's go through there. They want to fight. I'll give them a fight, And it was crazy, because a lot of people would say, well, why would you put yourself in those situations? Like, it was 5, 6 girls, 7 girls, And the way I would think about it was, and I didn't know that till I know now, is I wanted them to hurt me. I wanted it to happen so that I could just get it over with. You know what I mean? And but I also wanted to hurt somebody.
Wow.
So I became a big bully. And it was not good. It was not good. And I did some of the worst things. I think and maybe it'll be for another video, it's one of the worst things I ever did to somebody, right? But it's still something that to this day is very shameful and it sucks. And if I look back and I think about where Christ was in my life, that was one of the big moments where he intervened. And instead of accepting it, I hurt this person that he sent my way. And then years later I apologized and everything. She was a sister, she was a Christian. And
Oh,
and at that point, I was just kind of like, I had all my friends, it's really crazy, but like best friends growing up, they had all been Christians and
mhm.
they would invite me to their churches. And I remember I'd go to church and I'd get like all scared because it would be those type of churches where like people would catch the Holy Ghost, and do all kinds of
Oh, man, that sounds like a
stuff.
Pentecostal
Yeah,
church or something.
yeah, and I remember being at one of these events really early on and being like, what is happening? Like, that is
Oh,
scary,
man.
And so I would stop going because it would throw me off. And I'd be like, if this is like God, like I'm cool, And
Mm.
then later on, I went to this person's church that I'm talking about, and it was different. It was very organized. There was a lot of order. And her mom was so sweet to me, despite her knowing how bad I bullied her daughter.
Mhm.
Her mom invited me on this like weekend getaway, like in the cabin somewhere, and she just treated me so nice. And it just led me to just feel so repentful for what I had done to this person. And I remember it was one of the first times I ever apologized to anybody in my life for anything I ever did. And I was already maybe about 13, 14 years old. And then on, I went on for a lot of stuff to happen. I went to multiple middle schools, got kicked out of a lot of high schools. They got to a point where I got expelled, and they just did not want me anywhere because I was trouble. But I couldn't go to continuation school because I wasn't old enough. I wasn't 15 and a half. So I spent 7 or 8 months of eighth grade not going to school, just chilling at home because no school would want me. And
Uh,
then finally ninth grade comes around, and I'm thinking I'm gonna go to high school with everybody that I know. And I do something so stupid. I burnt trash cans at a local park and they expel me from the district. And so then I'm like, okay, great. Now what am I gonna do? So then my mom finds this relative of my dad, and I start going to this other school near the city where we lived, but in Hacienda Heights in another district.
yeah.
And so I show up there and I look like a complete little hoodlum, total cholita. And this is a school with a lot of predominantly white and Asian kids. So everybody's like terrified of me. Everybody's just like, don't nobody talk to her. And the people that did talk to me, they talked to me because they were afraid that I was going to bully them. So a lot of my friends were older than me because they were the only ones who were like, we'll hang out with you. So I started going to parties and I started getting exposed to drugs, to sex, to all kinds of things that, you just see at these high school parties.
Yeah.
Nas was really big at that time, like I said, I'm 33, so it's a huge thing at that time. And even though I'm seeing all of that, God was so good that I never got into it. I
Mhm.
never took part in it. I never did drugs. I never smoked weed. I was just like, he was like, that's not for you. And I just didn't. It was never in my interest. And a lot of the girls that I hung out with, a lot of them were, women at like the women on the well, like a lot of them were. And I remember that my mom would always tell me, why do you hang out with them? You hang out with girls like that, you're gonna end up like that.
Right.
But I would just be like, no, you're just judging her, you don't know her, and sure enough, I've gotten into some serious situations because I've kept friends like that. There's multiple times where I'm like about to go to jail because I end up in like bad places, at the wrong time because of the people I was with. But thankfully I never got into anything that really got me in serious trouble. And then I was still doing no good, and I was failing all my classes. I was in high school now. And at this point, the little boyfriend I had, who I told you about, my first boyfriend, I
Yeah.
was with him for about 5 years. 3 of those years were just a phone call.
Yeah.
The last 2 years, what's a trip, and why I'm telling you about this school is because I show up at this school, and at the end of my first day of school, I'm walking out to go meet my mom because I lived pretty far from the school. And I see this bald-headed, cholito looking guy, and he's kind of cute, but he's like looking at me, and I'm like looking at him, and I'm like, bro, do I know you? Why are you staring at me like that? And I turn around, and it's my boyfriend.
Oh.
And I'm like, what? Like, what are you doing here? And he's like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, I go here. He's like, I go here too. But like, we didn't know. That's how innocent our relationship was. And then I found out he was a little playboy, but I was so in denial. I was so in denial, Edgar, because he was like my world. I was so infatuated and in love with this guy in my little mind, the puppy love that you have, that I couldn't see anyone else. And he was the only one that I thought knew me because he's the one that I'd spent the most time talking to. So he was a little controlling, and he was never like abusive outwardly to me to where like he hit me or he called me names or anything like that. I don't think that my personality allows for that, but but he was controlling in subtle ways where he would be like, hey, I really love you, and I don't want you, other guys to disrespect you, so don't wear that, and you shouldn't wear makeup, and you shouldn't wear this, and and I would listen because I'm like, why would he tell me something that is bad for me,
Right.
And in a lot of ways, this relationship, I was just really throwing my life away. I wasn't doing any of my schoolwork. I didn't care about anything. I just cared about being with him. That was it. And little by little, he started kind of telling me like, hey, you gotta try in school. Like, you can't just like give up, and I'm like, nah, I don't care about school. Like, I'm cool,
Yeah.
And he's like, no, but like, if we're gonna have a life together when we finish high school, like, aren't you thinking about college? And I'm like, no, like, I'm too pretty for that. We don't go to college, because my mindset was like, hey, you're not going to do that. It wasn't even a thought, no one had ever asked me that anymore. And I remember he would do my homework. He would do my homework. He would do my homework so that I wouldn't fail, And then in one of these instances, we were together for like 2 years, and we went to a few parties and things like that. But he started pressuring me to have sex with him.
Okay.
And I didn't want to. First, because I was terrified of my mom, and I just knew she's gonna find out. She's that woman that just finds out about everything, and she's gonna kill me because I was like really terrified of her. But I wasn't like, I'm not gonna have sex with you because God says it's the wrong thing. I was like not gonna have sex with him because I was like really terrified of my mom. Like,
Right.
there was that fear, and every time he would tell me and he would pressure me, he would hurt me. Like, he would hurt my feelings, and I would say like, why don't you get it? Like, I'm not ready for that, and I would hear like, if you love me, you'll wait for me. Like, I'm not ready to do that yet, and I think part of it was always because I didn't want to grow up like that. I knew that was, because my mom had been cheated on, and a lot of the women I knew had been cheated on. I knew that once I gave that away, like, it's a wrap. Like, I can't take it back, and now that person has some leverage over you, and
Yeah.
and so I just didn't want to, and I remember it ended our relationship. It got to the point where he would say, well, if you don't want to have sex with me, you've been with me for 5 years, like, then I'm just gonna go get it from someone else, and I was like, seriously? And you could imagine, like, this is like my everything, my world, right?
Yeah.
So it would crush me a lot. We would have a lot of fights because of it. And one of these instances, we were in a fight, and I would come out in first lunch, because there was 2 lunches at the high school, to meet him, to have lunch with him, and ditch my class, and I was walking out and I was going on my way to meet him. And I spot him far away, and he's sitting on a bench, and he has this other girl sitting next to him. And she puts her arm around him like this, and she kisses him on the cheek. It hit me so hard, Edgar, that like, I think I still remember it. I was walking, like there's a lot of people, and I literally fell. Like I fell on the ground, and I was like, are you kidding me right now? Like this, I'm gonna kill her. My thought was like, I'm going to kill her. Not like I'm gonna kill him, or I'm so mad at him, but I'm gonna kill her. And you know what? I started getting these really, really, imagine how much my not obsession, but my love for this guy was, that I literally thought about hurting this girl. And I would follow her like after school and like bully her. And she was terrified of me, to the point where like, if I was near her, like she would shake. And I would just be laughing, like, what are you shaking about? I haven't even done anything to you, And it'd be like the type of thing where like, one time I remember I started crying, and I was so mad because she wouldn't do anything. And I couldn't with that. That would get me so heated. Like, someone's picking on you, someone's like wanting to fight with you, and you don't do anything. Like, what the hell is your problem? And I would almost like force her to fight me, but it wasn't fun if she didn't fight back. So I would leave her alone.
Mhm.
So she knew, like, if I don't do anything, if I don't react, she's not going to hurt me. So I wouldn't. So I started getting these thoughts of like talking to some of the homies and like seriously taking her out. Like, I really thought that. It crossed my mind. And the day that I thought that, I never came back to school. I left the school and I said, I can't come here. I can't be that freaking psycho that I'm thinking about, like killing this girl, like over, whatever it is that I think she did to this relationship. Because you have to understand, in my mind, like I'm thinking, there's no one else. I don't want to be with anyone else. I had already planned my life with this guy. That was going to be my baby daddy at like 19, like I had already planned all this out. We had kid names picked out, you know what I mean? It was a huge deal. It was very serious in my head,
Yeah.
But anyway, long story short, I never came back to the school. I dropped out of the school, and I never talked to that boyfriend again. I never called him. I didn't break up with him. I just refused to talk to him. And his mom and his family came to my house looking for me. And I remember his mom was crying at the door, and she was like, what happened with them? Like, and I was just like, I'm not talking. Like, I don't never want to see him again, And that was the second time I experienced depression really bad. I lost like 20 pounds. I really think I honestly, I don't remember it clearly, but I think I was suicidal. Like, seriously, I think that I contemplated like taking pills or like taking my life, because I couldn't just fathom, like, how am I going to, like, what just happened to my life, And then I felt so alone at home because I didn't have a relationship really with my parents or anybody. So, and I was never really like friendly to where I had a lot of girlfriends. I still, to this day, I think I've told you I don't. I have like one girlfriend. She's, Odette, like my bestie, she's like it. I don't really have a lot of girlfriends, and I never really have. And I think it's part of that, that just kind of trickled down. But after that, I remember that my mom was like, you got to knock this out. You got to stop. You got to stop what you're doing. You got to go back to school. You got to, what are you going to do? And I signed up for the school that I originally got expelled from. It had already been 2.5 years later. Mm-hmm. And they had a police academy. And I remember that I told my mom, the only way I'll go to school is if they accept me. If they don't accept me, I don't care. I'm not going back to school. I'm just going to work. And sure enough, they accepted me like junior year, like second semester of junior year, they accepted me because I had really good grades. And I started going to school. So now I go to La Puente.
Mhm.
And I did not anticipate to see a lot of those old bullies, a lot of those old people that would bully me when I was younger. But I did. I started going to school and everybody was there, but I didn't get involved with the general kids because I was in an academy. So it was uh, very structured. And I needed that. I really needed that because I just was not disciplined. I was just doing what I wanted, and I started kind of failing classes again. I didn't really care. But I remember that still I just totally forgot about God, didn't think about God at all, at that point, because I was just so angry because how could I be with him for so long and all of a sudden it was gone, And that was like my first like real probably my second heartbreak in my life, right? My dad broke my heart the first time. Going back to that, when I found out what cheating was and all of that, he just kind of, my dad was like on a pedestal for me.
Right.
And then my mom showed me things that she shouldn't have showed me. And he just came down, like he just fell from grace in my eyes. And that was like my first heartbreak, right? And then it was this boyfriend I had. And then anyway, I ended up like being in high school and trying, but I wasn't doing good. And I was still like kind of not really listening to guys. I would get hit on. I don't know one guy that I met at school that did not want to date me. And that's not me like, gloating or like tooting my horn. It's true. And I just wouldn't, because I'm like, I'm not going to date you. I'm not. And I'd make up boyfriends. I'd be like, no, I have a boyfriend. He just doesn't come here. So like they could just leave me alone, But eventually I ended up meeting somebody who was younger than me, 2 years younger than me. And he was initially dating one of my friends. And I remember not thinking he was like cute or anything. I was just like, he's a little kid, But I started going to gigs and I started hanging out with bands and I started kind of just, hanging out like high school kids. And I remember that I wasn't doing good in school and I was hanging out with just doing crazy things. And then I had this class. It was a forensic science academy class. And I was that kid that made teachers cry. I got kicked out like the first 15 minutes of class. Like that was me. Okay. And so I'm in this class and I'm like, I can't wait till this teacher comes in. And, I kind of just do what I always do. And in walks this like 6'2", bald, really well fit, Navy SEAL. And I'm just like, who the heck is this dude, And he speaks with authority and he's like very disciplined and his suit is crispy, dude. Like when he took off his suit, he like hung it up and nobody touched his suit. Like it was just, it's something that in my mind, I can still see him walking in the room. And the authority that this man walked with, like you couldn't help it but respect him. He demanded it just by the way that he looked and he carried himself. And I remember that I tried to be a smart butt and like, give him smart answers and like be rude in class. And I wanted him to kick me out so I could go walk around the halls or whatever. And I remember that he looked at me and he said to me, "You're not a bad kid." And I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, you don't even know me. Like, mind your own business. Like, leave me alone, And he says, "You know what? No, as a matter of fact, you're like sunshine," he said to me. And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "You have this like light in you. And from now on, your new name is Sunshine." And I was like, "That's a stupid name." Like I was so mad. I was like, "That's a stupid name, man. You can't do that to me, Well, tell me why little by little, this man just completely changed my life, Edgar. He saved me. Honestly, he did. To this day, I remember him and I'm so grateful to God for him because his perception of me was nothing like the one I had in my mind.
Mhm.
And his ability to just like, call me what nobody else saw, like what I couldn't see, because that wasn't how I was behaving. That wasn't what my grades said. That's not what people knew about me. He, in other words, what's that scripture that says you call it as if, how is it? You call it as if you call things as if they are, even though you don't see them, right? Even though they're not. And that's what he did. And he literally like revived me. So then from then on, I just got so hooked on school, and I wanted to just get an A plus in his class, because I respected him so much. And then he told me, hey, you should be one of my cadets. And he put me in a law enforcement academy. And I never looked back. That part of my life like died that year. And I got like hooked on achievement, on discipline, on respect, on integrity. And it changed my entire trajectory of life. And so what happens then is I'm still in high school, right? Mind you, and I'm working really hard. I'm going to these police academies, and I'm trying really hard to just, be my best. And I have this little boyfriend who I'll backtrack and tell you about, some other time, but he becomes my husband after high school. Okay. He's my high school sweetheart, becomes my husband. But meanwhile, I'm with him for 9 months while I'm at the school. And then I break up with him because I think he's too soft. Like, I'm like, dude, you're like a little kid. Like, I can't be with you. So I break up with him. I break his heart. And then I find this other boyfriend, a drill instructor at one of these police academies that I'm going to, right? And I like fall in love with this guy, okay? I just loved like the way that he carried himself, right? But I was never sexually involved with him or anything like that, because he had very, very high respect for me. And he knew at that point I hadn't been sexually active with anybody. So he respected that. And we were together for a few months, and then it didn't work out because his sister got involved and it ruined our relationship. And, anyway, long story short, I finished the police academy and I'm doing good. And I'm not fighting. I haven't fought all like the last 3 years of high school, did not put my hands on anyone. And then the last 2 weeks of school, I get jumped. I get jumped by a gay guy, literally a homosexual guy, and a homosexual girl, a lesbian. And they like double team me, and I black out like I did so many times before when I was young. And there's hair all over my face. And at this point, I'm handcuffed, and I'm still kicking this person, in the face, and like just trying to just get them whatever way I can. And then I get pulled from the fight by a cop. And they're like, like you like, we're arresting you. Like, you caused severe bodily harm. And I'm like, what happened? And I have no idea what's going on, because I'm like, I'm not there. I disassociated, right? Like, I just go away, because that's what would happen when I would get violent. Like, I just lose track of where I'm at or what I'm doing. Because of probably all the beatings that I had growing up, I would just learn to just kind of go away in my mind and not trip on the violence. So anyway, long story short, I go home and I'm suspended, and my mom doesn't know. I'm already in high school. It's my senior year. I knew I wasn't going to walk. They told me, like, you screwed your chances. You're not going to go to the ceremony. And I was like, whatever, I don't like anybody that comes here anyway. Like, who cares? Who cares? I don't need to walk, And it was my way of justifying, like, you're going to have to deal with the consequences of what you did, But I remember that there's a knock on my door that same day, later in the night. And it's that girl that jumped me and her mom. And I'm like, oh my goodness. They're going to tell my mom, like, what's going to happen right now. So I'm like hiding behind a wall. My mom opens the door, and my mom again had, mind you, not a happy person, never, So my mom opens the door, and this lady starts telling my mom, your daughter beat up my daughter today, and my daughter's in the hospital, and or she was in the hospital and she has these medical bills, and now you're responsible for paying and all this other stuff. And my mom looks at her, and my mom tells her, what do you want with me? Like, what do you want? And the lady's like, I'm telling you, your daughter hurt my kid. And my mom's like, what? Do you want some too? Like, did you come to fight? Like, what do you want? And the lady like looks at my mom and says, you know what? I feel sorry for your daughter. I feel sorry for her. It makes sense now. And she walks away. And she kills me behind the wall, like, what did she just say? You know what I mean? But instead of being like hurt, like instead of being like mad about it and aggressive and, defensive about it, she really hurt me. Like, I could not believe she thought that low of me because of the way my mom responded. And it was the first time I thought to myself, like, for somebody who says they don't want to be anything like their mother, like, I'm just like her. And I don't want to be like that, And so it was like some of my first times of really just reflecting with God, like, why am I like this? I don't want to be like this, and having that conversation with him. And I remember they'd make me go to like anger management, and I'd be like, but I'm not mad. Like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. Like, I'm not mad, And they would tell me all the time, like, no, you are very mad, And little by little, it just dawned on me that I was depressed a lot of my life growing up, and that I was really angry, but I wasn't angry at the right person. I wasn't angry at the right reasons. I was taking my anger out on everybody else because of that commitment I had made to myself when I was that young. Remember when I said to myself, I could get beat up at home, but I'm not going to get beat up at school.
Right.
So that long ago, I made that conscious decision, and it had stayed with me this whole time. And it started creating so many problems in my relationship because my boyfriend at the time was the only one that I was really close to, the only one who really knew me. So I just transferred that attachment from that first boyfriend to this next one. And oh man, it was all bad from there. On and off, on and off. And then high school senior year comes, and I find out that I'm an immigrant. And I find out that I can't go to college. I find out that I don't have papers to go to Cancun with my friends. So therefore, I'm even more bitter, more angry, more resentful. I start getting fired from jobs because of my social security number.
Yeah.
And now I'm really angry at my mom, and I'm really angry at my dad. And you guys should have just left me in my country. And I had no idea what I was saying because I'd never been in Mexico. I didn't know what life was like, Now I'm thankful to God that they brought me, but then I didn't know. So I was just so angry because I wanted to do so much. Yeah. And I wanted to go to school, and I couldn't. And all these people that could go were not going. And my ex-husband or boyfriend at the time included, I was so resentful with him because he would get free books. He would get school paid, and I had to work 2 full-time jobs to pay for 2 classes without books, So it was like but I kept going. And I remember that I would get a lot of discouraging feedback, even from people I love. Like even my dad, one time he told me, like, what are you going to school for? You can't even do anything with it. Like, you should stop wasting your time. Like, just work. And I was just like, I just kind of like sucked that up, and I just kept going. And I didn't know for what, but I knew, because I'd be like, no, God, I just know you could turn it around. And when I least expected it, my grandmother, whom I love very much, and who has now passed away, right, in 2015. But she pretty much was there for me as a mother figure when my mom and dad were working or like acting, a fool. And she protected me a lot of times from my mom. And so during this time, this critical time in my life, my grandma gets very sick. And I get word that, that she might die. And I remember that being the very like first time again, the first times again that I get on my face and I start pleading with God. And I start telling him, like, you have to come through. This is not fair. In my little mind, right? This is not fair. How dare you, God? How dare you do me like this? And I start questioning him. And I was very angry at him. And I tell him, I'm so mad at you that this is happening. Like, it's not fair. Like, she's the only person that's been there for me. And now I can't even see her. Don't you dare take her away from me, And I was like, this back and forth with him, probably 3 or 4 years. And every time he kept her. And I remember one of the last things, they say you shouldn't bargain with God, but still we do. And I did, because I didn't know any better. So I'm like telling God, if you keep her till I'm able to see her just one more time, I will dedicate my life to you, And I remember that I just wasn't seeing it. There was no way. And they called me again and they said, hey, like, I don't think she's going to make it. And I got this, like, you know how like sometimes pastors speak about how there's this sense of urgency when something's going to happen, and you just got to pray through that urgency. Well, I got that feeling of urgency in my spirit. Like I need to do something about this now. Like, I can't wait. And so I started thinking about what could I do? And at that moment, I was separated from my ex-husband now, which was my boyfriend then. We had broken up for like 5 months, and I had been dating other guys, and there was a couple of guys that I was really getting along with, hitting it off very well. And I was leaving my ex-boyfriend kind of in the past, like, move on, Sandry, right? And when this urgency came over me, I got the thought, the only way I could fix my papers was to get married. There was no other way for me. We went to lawyers, we researched it, we really tried. And the DREAM Act was not in happening yet.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't have a choice. I have to get married. And now I'm like, now I don't got a boyfriend. Who the heck am I going to marry, right? So I start telling these people, and, I call up my ex-husband, who at the time wanted to get back with me. And I said to him, the only way we can get together is if you marry me. I'm done playing with you. Like, I'm done playing games. We've been together 5 years and I'm not playing with you anymore. And if you're not going to want to get married, that's cool. But I'm going to move on to someone else because I need to move on with my life. And I remember telling these guys that I was talking to, hey, I'm sorry, but we can't talk anymore because I'm getting married. And one of them was like crying. You can't marry him. You're not in love with him. Like, I'll marry you. We'll just be friends. Like, I don't even want anything, So I had all of a sudden I had 3 proposals for marriage, right? But in my mind, I said to myself, you know what? No. Nobody deserves it but him, in my mind. My ex-boyfriend deserves for us to get married because he's going to deal with the consequences, because I don't want to get married. And so anyway, we get together under those pretenses and we get married. And for a couple of years, it's great. It's amazing. He's incredible. He was my best friend. He's the only guy I knew carnally. I'm the only girl he ever knew. We got along great. We had great times. He was respectful. He was funny, incredible human being. But about 3 years after our marriage, we started having issues. He stopped being sexually intimate with me. And I'm somebody that's always following patterns. So I'm like, what's going on? Bro, are you cheating on me? What's happening? Right. So I start pressuring him and pressuring to find out what's going on. And I find out he's been addicted to pornography since he was 8 years old. And I find out that he has a sexual interest in the same sex, or not the same sex, but rather like transvestites or she-males or whatever. And it literally crushes my heart. And I get my heart broken again. And now I'm like worse than before, because now I'm like, God, I didn't want to get married. And you said, and I got married and I tried the best I could. And look at what's happening now. And I wanted to leave my marriage. So I went to my house, my father and mother's house. And I said to my mother and father, I need to come home because my husband just disclosed this to me and I don't want to live with him anymore. I don't want to be there. I'm sick to my stomach. I can't even sleep next to him. And I remember that my mom said, no, you're married, very traditional. My mom's kind of like that mentality that you're married, you're screwed. Because think about her marriage, right? So she says, hey, you know what? You married him and now you go home and you deal with your husband. I don't believe you anyway. You're a liar. And I look at my dad, Edgar, and I say, Dad, like, tell her something, like, seriously. And my dad says, no, you got to go home. And so I go back home and I make another promise to myself. And I'm really good at keeping promises to myself, Edgar. I promise myself, I'm not going to leave your sight until I'm able to do so. It's nobody's responsibility to deal with me or to take care of me financially because you signed up and you married me. So I'm not going to leave until I'm able to leave. And I stuck around in a sexless marriage for 5 years.
Oof.
And it was during this time, I'm going to school for my master's degree. And I met a lot of people, but I'm also partying really hard. My version of hard is like, I'm just going out every week and like drinking, right? Never drugs or anything like that. Not like sleeping around or anything like that, but very resentful and just kind of wanted to be distracted. I hated the life I was living. But then I also loved the life I was living because we got along great and we never fought and we were best friends and we had a great time and our families loved each other. And then one day, I decided to go to a Bible study. And it was my first Bible study ever. And I went because my husband now invited me. And he said, you got to go check out this Bible study because at that time I had this Christian client who wanted a Christian therapist. And I remember telling, my husband who I worked with at the time, I want to treat him. I believe in God, but I don't think I'm competent because I don't know the Bible. I don't know anything about scripture. So a lot of what he's telling me, like, I don't know what he's talking about. And so he said to me, go to Bible study, and learn about it. And then you can treat him. And I said, hey, that sounds like a great idea. So I go to Bible study under the pretense that they're going to teach me things so that I could work with the client, not for me. Right. And what ended up coming out of that was me really, I feel like the Holy Spirit really telling me in my heart of hearts, the life you're living is a lie. And God doesn't want you to live in a lie. He wants you to live in reality. And I remember it so clearly, Edgar, because the message I had in my mind was stop rewinding the tape. Let it play. You've done this over and over again. You've taken him back multiple times. You've tried to make it work multiple times. For 5 years, you're trying to make it work. Let it play. And I'm like, what does that mean, God? Like, I don't get it. I didn't want to get it because that means that I had to leave my relationship. So for 2 weeks, I prayed every day, trying to kind of just get to know God, trying to hear from God. And the messages were coming in clear. you have to leave the marriage. You have to leave it. And I was like, but how's that going to work? The last time I tried, my family pretty much disowned me. Nobody believed me. Everybody kind of just, told me to deal with it. Suck it up. You're a liar. I said, what am I going to do? Like, how do I do that? And so that's where my relationship with God really, really grew.
Okay.
And I remember.
Here's the good stuff.
Yes, I remember having a thought, and the thought was, hey, my birthday's coming up. And for my birthday, we were going to go out and have dinner at this place that I had been wanting to go for years, but we never went. And so we go to this place, and after we have dinner, we go to this bar and we have drinks. And the Holy Spirit says, hey, like, it's time. It's time. And I'm like, no, it's not. We're having such a great dinner. And I'm really enjoying my drink. Like, it's not the right time. And it just says, no, it's time. You have to tell him now. And I remember looking at him, and we're laughing. We're having a good time. And I get up and I go to the restroom and I start praying. And I say, Holy Spirit, intervene. Help me. I don't know what to say. Help me so that I say what needs to be said so that he understands and receives it. Because I was afraid that if he told me, no, babe, please don't leave me, that I would be like, okay, it's cool, never mind. You know what I mean? Because it had been so hard to leave him. And so anyway, I pray really hard and I go back out and I start talking to him. And I said to him, I love you. And he says, yeah. And I said, and I've given you everything I have. I have nothing else to give you. Nothing. I said, and a long time ago, I promised you that the day I was able to leave, I would leave. I said, now God has really spoken to my heart. And I really feel like he's saying, I need to move on from you because I'm living a lie. I've asked you multiple times to come to church with me, to follow God, and you don't want to. I've asked you multiple times to get married. I wanted to get married in church. I wanted like a real wedding because we just did like the signature thing, the legal thing. And he didn't want to. And I said, so if you don't want to like be my husband, you can't just want to expect me to continue just being your girlfriend. Like, I'm your wife. I want a house. I want a family. I want things. And you just are not ready to do that. You're always so scared. He was always so terrified of everything. I said, you don't want to have babies. You don't want to buy a house. You don't want to, try that career. You're just always so scared. And he looked at me and he said, you're right. I'm terrified. And he said to me, okay. And I was like, what? What do you mean, okay? I've been trying to break up with you for so long. What do you mean, okay? And he said to me, okay, can you just give me a couple of months to move out? And I was like, okay, God, like, it was you. This isn't just coming from me. So for the next 3 months, he lived with me in total indifference. We didn't talk. We didn't really hang out with each other. It was very uncomfortable. He was trying to come up with money so that he didn't have to move back in with his mom. And it was hard. It was very hard every single day to see him little by little just kind of walking to freedom. And the way I told him was like, I see you like a little bird in a cage. You do not fly because I don't let you. And he said to me, I don't know why I can't do anything with you. And he says, I have all these thoughts. I want to do so much. And, but I just, you're very intense. He said, you're very intimidating. I can't do anything with you. You're so great. He said, you're such an amazing wife. You're such a great person. You're a beautiful person. And I can't. And I was just like, that doesn't make sense to me. Right. But I accepted that it was God's will for us to separate. And every day I asked for courage to like, let it go. And I did. I was able to do it. And it took so long, I felt, because when we finally separated and he moved out, I went through depression again. And everybody kind of knew, but nobody in my family was like, what's going on with you? So I decided to leave, and I went on a road trip for like 2 weeks. I drove from here to New York and visited like every state on the way. It was like 26 states. And I stayed in hotels by myself, and it was just me and God the whole time. I'd wake up with God. I talked to God throughout all the day. And it was kind of like he was telling me, like, we're going to New York. And I was like, what? Like, me and you, we're going to New York. And I remember packing my bags, going home and telling my mom and dad, I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. I'm going to New York. And they're like, what? Like, that's crazy. But I did. And in that, there was a lot of moments where I cried myself to sleep, Edgar, and it was tough. It was hard, because it's like you have to come to terms with the change in identity from going from, hey, you've been a married one unit person with this person for so long, for 13 years, and now you're just single, and now you're just you. And now you're back to just being you. And you can't go from being one to now being two again. It's very, very hard. And so that's when I started understanding the covenant of marriage and what it meant and why it was so difficult, because every part of my being hurt. Like, it wasn't just my spirit. My body went through physical pain leaving this man. My mind, everything took so long to adapt. And then, at the same time, I was like falling in love with someone else. And I was like, no, God, no, like that can't be true. He's too old for me. He has kids. He has a baby mama. Every reason why that could just not be it for me, I gave God. Like, no, that is not the right one. And he was like, you don't tell me. Like, I know what I'm doing. And the way that it worked out, and it's literally, this would take like a whole nother hour, so I'm going to cut it pretty soon. But that's pretty much when I realized, like, me being with my husband was God's
Husband right now?
Yeah, my husband right now. And so maybe I wasn't, I know. Maybe I was not supposed to move in with him as quick as I did. And then I realized I was living in sin, and that was not what God wanted for my life. So God is never going to lead you to sin against him, ever. But I jumped the gun. Like, I knew this was what God was telling me, but I kind of took that message and kind of did my own thing with it. I did not wait. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I reaped the consequences of that. And it was very, very painful. And once again, God's chastisement came through, and I was on the floor on my face. Lord, why did I do this? And he started showing me. And then when I was going to get married, because I realized I was living in sin, and I prayed, I fasted and prayed for like over a month with my best friend, Odette. And I was just seeking God every day. Tell me if I need to leave him, like, I'll leave him. Like, if you want me to marry him, I'll do that too. Like, tell me what you need me to do. And little by little, like, I would get confirmation. So one night in my dreams, I got confirmation that I was to marry him. And then, we moved on and we got married. And after that, a lot of the anxiety that I had as a single, not married, just cohabitating person went away. Literally evaporated. Like, I never think about that stuff ever again. Mm-hmm. And it was almost like, now you're married. But before that, before I finally said, yes, I'm going to marry you, we went through like premarital counseling. Like, I feel like I went through that. Like, Jesus took me through that. It's crazy to say that, but honestly, because we were looking and we were trying to find it at my church that I go to now, we were trying to just find somebody to do the premarital counseling, which could be anywhere from 2 sessions to 10 sessions, right? But it just depends. And nobody would come through. So I remember after seeking God's face, and I was like fasting and praying, that in the messages with him, while I was doing my, my prayers, I would go into prayer like 45 minutes, an hour. It would go by and I'd be like, okay. And I don't know what I was receiving, but I would just be like, okay, Lord, yes, Lord, yes, Lord. But I had no idea what it was. And now I realize it's, it's spiritual. I don't know. I still don't know. I can't understand it with my mind, but I did receive that confirmation, but not before God showed me who I was. He showed me who my husband was. He revealed everything about my husband, and it was painful. And I was like, what did I get myself into?
Oh man.
It was hard. And then it was having the faith in God that he would turn it around for my good, that he would change my husband, that I couldn't change him, that he would. And if I just acted the way I was supposed to, and I just did what I was supposed to, that it would work out. And it did, but not until he showed me. And I was scarier than my husband. And then when he showed me, I was repenting for like months straight. Could not believe the amount of stuff that I had done against my ex-husband, against people that I knew, against myself, against God. He showed me all of the sins that I had no idea I had done. And after and it was, I knew it, now I know it as the process of cleansing you, right? That pruning was happening. And it happened right before I got married, because he said, in my understanding, I will cleanse you white as snow, and you will not marry my son until you're ready. And I realized that was my daily prayer. Help me treat your son the way you want me to. Help me be ready to be that wife that you want for him. I don't want it unless you want it for him, Lord. And he's your son, so you know better. And then, so it was praying for him, praying for me, praying for our relationship, praying for his ex-wife, praying for his kids, praying for my family. And you know what? Everything just fit in so beautifully. My family was just so open-minded to our relationship. They've received him, very well. And he's a great husband, and I feel like we've definitely I feel like we were a good thing. We had a good relationship, but I feel like it's so much better and so much stronger now that Christ is like in the center of it, And so he's come through for me in different levels of faith, different times and of my life. It's never just been one thing. It's after another, after another, after another, several years. Even when I've let go, he's like, I'm right here. I haven't left. I haven't left. I'm right here. And so now that's it, learning to kind of continue walking that faith and encourage everybody around me and everybody I work with. I take everything and everyone I meet as a divine intervention, as a meeting from God. Like, I don't know what I'm called to do with this, for this person or with this person. Maybe it's just prayer. Maybe it's just praying for them. Maybe something I say will, encourage them, will lift their spirit. I don't know, but I firmly believe that. And so I try to just treat everybody like God's watching, because he is, right? And that's pretty much it. I hope that I answered all of your questions that you had that you didn't get to ask.
Yeah, that's nothing. You're answering as I'm thinking of the question. Like, I'm just gonna be quiet, just answering them as I'm thinking. So
Yeah. Right.
All
So
right, good. It's actually encouraging for me, especially the last part.
Yeah.
But yeah, good. Good.
Right on.
Alrighty,
Well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you very
doing
much
that.
for your time.
Of course.
And post it up, and then I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
So, all right, thank you.
Okay, have a blessed night, Edgar. Bye.
Have a good one.